Hey, what's up, everybody? Tim Albrecht here, and welcome to this week's episode of the Ask a YFP CFP segment of the Your Financial Pharmacist Podcast, where we feature questions from you, the YFP community, to be answered by one of our very own fee-only certified financial planners. Please note this podcast is intended for educational purposes and should not be considered financial or investment advice, as we do not know all the variables to one's personal situation when answering a question. Before we jump into today's question, a shout out to our extraordinary YFP financial planning team that makes this segment possible. Your Financial Pharmacist offers fee-only comprehensive financial planning services that are customized to the pharmacy professional. So whether you want to pay off your student loans, make the right investment decisions, or simply build a solid financial plan, we'll help get your income working for you rather than the other way around. You can learn more by visiting yfpplanning.com. Again, that's yfpplanning.com. Okay, this week's question comes from Amy in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Hi, this is Amy from Raleigh, North Carolina. An interesting question I'd appreciate some input on. It was drilled into my head in pharmacy school to carry my own personal liability malpractice insurance and never to rely on the company to cover you because they cover their interests and not yours. So I've always had my own. I have another pharmacist friend who attended pharmacy school at the same time as me in a different part of the country who had it drilled into her head to never have your own because your company would leave you out on your own if they knew you had it. What's the best way to think about this?
Thank you, Amy, for submitting your question to be featured on this week's Ask a YFP CFP segment of the Your Financial Pharmacist Podcast. Tim Baker, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is an interesting question because I feel like I've always been on the camp more so, Amy, and in your camp where drilled into your head to have your own policy versus the employer, your colleagues saying that it was drilled into their head that if they had their own policy, they'd be on their own. At the end of the day, the core of this is your license is tied to you, not necessarily your employer. So you want to do everything that you can to protect yourself. And if we reference back to episode 155 of the YFP podcast, we went kind of into a deep dive on this. And the employer policies are there really to protect the employer, unfortunately. So, if you are doing things that are outside scope of practice, you're kind of up a creek either way, and I think that's one of the big things is that that's ever changing, and it's ever changing by state. So I think at a minimum, especially because of the price of these policies are so cheap, it's worth having in place just for safety reasons. I did actually, in my research for this, because there was a different way that you asked the question, is there anything punitive that the employer can do, which is really just leave you on your own? So one of the things I found, and it was actually on the APHA website, and I think, Tim, you were at the bottom of this article, the author said that there may be some risks associated with your own policy, according to the lawyer who taught a course focusing on legal and financial aspects of healthcare administration as part of my MBA program. She felt that if you carry your own policy and practice in a hospital setting, you may be open yourself to a greater likelihood of being sued because the prosecuting attorney will look at all the assets of those involved, and carrying your own policy can increase the potential award. So what that means is that, and we should link to that article and give credit to the author. But I think what that means is that if there are deep pockets in a policy that pays out $1 million for each occurrence, that's deep pockets, that it could increase the likelihood of you being sued versus if you had nothing. I think the thing is I'd still rather be, better safe than sorry. So I don't know if you have to disclose that the fact that you have your own liability policy. There could be some employers that, as an employer ourselves, I might feel better if I knew that my people actually had their own policies. I think at the end of the day, I would still lend, my vote to your camp. The average cost of a malpractice claim against a pharmacist these days, I think the average is about $124. A wrong dosage type of claim that can be north of $300,000. So if you're paying $150 per year to start, and it could be obviously more than that, that to me is chump change to make sure. And I think the other thing to consider is that these aren't just lawsuits, right? So I could work in the state of Ohio and do something and have a complaint directly against me that goes right to the board of pharmacy. And your employer's going to be like, sorry, bro, like you're out of luck. And if I'm suspended or I've lost a wage or I'm going through an investigation on their end, they're not inclined to do anything in their power to protect you. It also, I think, depends on how the complaint or everything is routed. So to me, it all goes back to, again, transferring the risk versus self-insuring or even relying on your employer to bail you out if something were to happen. And if we look at the scope of practice for pharmacy, we know that it's changing. We know that it's expanding. So that's going to be true for malpractice or any type of lawsuits that put the blame or the liability on a pharmacist. So nobody likes paying for insurance, but at the end of the day, I still would not succumb to optimism bias, which is that cognitive bias that there's the belief that this is going to happen to someone else, a faceless person in a crowd, and not to yours truly. So to me, I would again reiterate the fact that I'm a big believer in depending on what your scope of practice is, to have those policies in place and be safe than sorry.
Yeah, and for any PharmD, JD, YFP community members and listeners, we'd love to hear from you if you have input on this, and perhaps we can, even tackle this and further. I'm with you, Tim. I hadn't thought about it in this perspective, and we will link to that APH article in the show notes so people can dig a little bit further. And again, episode 155, we talked all things professional liability insurance for pharmacists, why you need it, what to look for, and so on. Tim, question for you here. We're talking about one type of insurance, professional liability insurance, but it makes me think about the bigger bucket of insurance as being a very important part of the financial plan, and probably one that folks may not think about when they think about working with a financial planner per se, right? Obviously, investments come to mind and perhaps student loans, although we know many planners don't address student loans appropriately. But insurance, how does insurance fit into the financial plan? How big of a topic is this for our financial planners when working with our pharmacist clients? Talk to us a little bit about the importance of insurance in the financial planning process.
Yeah, so I think the whole idea, at least what we espouse as our team of planners that work with pharmacists across the country, what we try to do is help the client grow and protect your income. The income is, although we kind of poo-poo like pharmacist income is going to be the end-all be-all to a healthy financial plan, it is the lifeblood of a financial plan. So we want to grow and protect income, grow and protect net worth, while keeping your goals in mind. And to me, that is kind of what the planning team does to support YFP's overall mission, which is to empower pharmacists to achieve financial freedom. So we believe in a planning relationship, we're really focused on the quantitative piece, which is income and net worth, and the qualitative piece, meaning we're building out a life plan that is supported by the financial plan, and we're executing to that plan in a way that's intentional and that is in view with what you deem as a wealthy life. To me, what we're talking about is protection here. And really the liability, the professional liability insurance really covers the protection of income, because you could have loss of income due to this, but also net worth. So, if you are, named in a lawsuit and they go after your assets personally, that you're talking about your house, your retirement assets, things like that, could be basically used as part of that payment. So we really want to build a wall around that balance sheet to protect you in case there is a catastrophic loss. And that's what insurance really is that we're transferring that risk from you to an insurance company, and they're using the rule of large numbers to say, okay, we're going to have a group of people. Not everyone's going to have a loss, but out of that group, we're going to have one or two over the course of many years or whatever the ratios are, and then that group, because we're all paying into it, is going to basically pay out and indemnify or make that person whole. So that's what we're talking about here. It's just a good piece of protection for the financial plan, so you're not left in financial ruin if something were to happen negatively. And again, it's one of those things where it's like, it'll never happen to me until it does. And then, it's like, I wish I would have spent that $150 per year or got that life insurance policy or the disability policy or whatever that is. That's really what we're talking about here. Is a lot of financial advisors sometimes will say, it's all about investment and growth of the assets and growth of the net worth. But to me, it's just one piece of that overall puzzle. And, to me, a lot of people, young and old, they view what they get through their employer as this is the end all be all. I have my health. I have life insurance. I have disability insurance. I'm covered by their professional liability plan. And in most cases, it ain't enough, and if you're doing this right, you really have to kind of look at which individual policies that you need, and maybe there are some that you don't need. But I think it's really important to do that because, again, the catastrophic event can really lead to, some negative consequences in terms of your ability to live a wealthy life.
Yeah, such an important part of the financial plan. I think overlooked, why I wanted to spend a few minutes on it. It reminds me of when I speak on this topic, right? It's like you pull up the insurance slides and everyone like the eyes just gloss over. And I think it's thinking about things you don't want to think about. It's an overwhelming topic at times. Policies can be difficult to navigate just based on the way that they're sold. And I think having an advocate in your corner, and a shout out to our planning team, where, what we're trying to do is find the right defensive strategy, as you mentioned, not too much, not too little, right? And that's, one of the beauties of the fiduciary responsibility and how we operate our planning services is that we've got your best interest in mind and looking at the entire spectrum of the financial plan. So it's going to be an expense. So how do we get what we need to protect what we need to protect, but how do we make sure we're not spending money we don't need to spend so we can turn that money into things that can have opportunity, paying down debt, investing for the future, other goals that we have. So I think there's a sweet balance there. And this part, I think, often gets overlooked. And of course, we're not even talking about the peace of mind that can come with making sure you got the right coverage in place.
I might have said this in episode 155. We've earned that in terms of I'm talking about financial planners, where if you're in pharmacy school, and this might resonate with you, someone comes in and they talk about finances, but it's really just a pitch to like buy an investment or a crappy insurance policy that you find out 3, 4 years, 5 years down the road that this was not in my best interest. And a lot of it is you have a hammer, you see a nail, and that's what it is, right? And then that's what a lot of financial planners do. And they're like, oh, your loans? I have no idea how to, they'll figure themselves out.
200,000, you're good. Yeah.
Yeah. They'll figure themselves out. I'll invest your IRA. I'll sell you a whole life and disability policy, and then come talk to me when you have assets. And sometimes that sting or that bad taste in our mouth that's kind of enveloped due to the insurance policy, it lingers. And there's nothing wrong with insurance. It's just that sometimes, our first foray into that is, where you feel like you're being taken advantage of. And that's never a fun place to be. And sometimes it does warrant to unwind those policies, but it's typically never the case unless you're just not practicing anymore, or it's typically never the case where you buy a professional liability policy and it's like, oh, I wish I didn't get that. Those are typically,
right,
again, very inexpensive and far-reaching in terms of what they can cover in terms of the scope of practice.
Great stuff. And Amy, again, thank you for submitting your question. I know we talked about professional liability plus some, but I think an important conversation as we think about the insurance part of the financial plan. And we would love to hear from you. If you have a question that we can feature on a future episode, please head on over to yourfinancialpharmacist.com/ask-YFP, or you can also shoot us an email at info@yourfinancialpharmacist.com. We're going to be sending Amy a super comfy YFP t-shirt as a small thanks for submitting her question. We appreciate you joining us each and every week, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.